You are now tuned in to the newest Bills Mafia production, FambaseSports. Join Jarek Hall and Kari Demos as they take you around the world of sports, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on the official network of the original Bills Mafia.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to FambaseSports. My name is Jarek Hall with my co-host Kari Demos, and we are back here again with a very special episode because we got a lot to talk about, guys. We got a lot of content to talk about. We got college football with media days. We had Big 12 media days. We had SEC media days, kind of the Big 12, Pac-12 merger that we're definitely going to be talking about because that's now kind of falling off the woodworks a little bit there. We're also going to be talking about some more training camp chatter because this week, man, training camp is starting to start off a little bit, especially with the Buffalo Bills. Their training camp doesn't open up to July 24th, but still, that is going to be a great time because we are preseason is literally next month. It is literally right around the corner, so we'll get right back to football action. We're also going to talk about NBA free agency chatter, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, potentially be on the same team with Golden State, and some more stuff that we're definitely going to be talking about. But, Kari, man, how are you doing, brother?
Doing all right, Jarek. It's a high-flying time in sports. There's a lot of different things. It's All-Star Week for any of you baseball fans out there. It was a treat to see the home run derby go down the way it did. That's the one sport I wish that, made a couple changes with things because I think it's holding itself back when it comes to that. But I digress. But yeah, it's been good. It's been fun seeing the Madden Ratings coming out. So it's been good. I hope everything's going all right on your end too.
Yeah, man, everything's been all right for the most part. And, we talked about it a little bit during the off air, man, just about everything that we're going to discuss. Man, it's a lot to talk about, a lot of sports stuff like that. But we're going to hop straight into it a little bit. Well, let me read the comments first. We got Brock, Kick, Kirito for the most part. Those guys ran a little bit earlier before we start. So I appreciate you guys. And appreciate, again, whether, watch it from Twitter, whether if you watch it from Facebook or whatever you're getting your podcast from, we gradually appreciate you guys for stopping by and showing us a lot of love. We want to thank you guys. And if you guys are new to Buffalo Fan Base, make sure to stop by the Buffalo Fan Base YouTube channel. Make sure to like, support, subscribe, make sure to share because there's a lot more content creators such as ourselves that will talk a lot more about sports. We got some soccer channels, football channels, of course, Buffalo Bills, since this is a Buffalo channel. We will talk about a lot about that, but for the most part, make sure you show those guys a lot of love and support. We would definitely gradually appreciate it. But we're going to hop straight into this thing, and we're going to talk about college football with SC Media Days because the one big name that everyone loves to talk about is Nick Saban. Kyrie, we've talked about Nick Saban such a while now, and we have our own thoughts about Nick Saban and about the NIL whole stuff, but we're going to bring it up again because it seemed like Nick Saban, we talked about it, seems a little bit media trained for a little bit for the most part. He was very careful with his approach here, but it wasn't anything too egregious or anything like that. Nick Saban, for the most part, pretty much stated just about, the complications of what NIL would definitely bring to the table and about NIL recruitment. And from, for the most part, I've talked to a lot of, parents that were, their sons were recruits. And, I'm not going to name the school, but obviously NIL, obviously with recruiting, it could be a little bit of a problem. And I do see what Nick Saban was talking about because when you present a recruit about certain NIL stuff and you don't really deliver on those promises, then all of a sudden at that point, you kind of just got them there on a lie, on a false lie. Now before it's happened a lot because, before a huge recruiting tip was that, hey, you have an opportunity to come play as a freshman, make a huge contribution to our team, and then all of a sudden they get there and it doesn't happen. So maybe it's a little bit of contradiction there, but for the most part, I do think that it could be a little bit of a problem because, I'll say it. A&M, for the most part, we all know that they're one of the schools that, for the most part, has used NIL for their advantage. And Jimbo doesn't want to admit it, but we've seen them literally caught on 4K trying to recruit kids with NIL money, with those suits right behind the suites. And then, of course, I've heard from other parents talk about that NIL was one of the first things that were brought up to them, not the relationships, not the coaching bond or what they can do or the academic side. It was the NIL. So this is brought up everywhere. We saw Texas Tech recently they just made a phenomenal deal as far as paying every single one of their players on scholarship and walk-ons $25,000. So a lot more schools are open about it. A lot more schools are starting to be open about it, and should be, because it is legal. And until the NCAA does something about it, obviously NIL is going to be a major factor. It's going to be a major part. But from the recruiting standpoint, I could see what Nick Saban's talking about as far as that being a little bit problematic, because when you're lying to kids about certain NIL, NIL type of NIL type of contracts, that could be a little bit of a problem. But Kyrie, man, kind of give you your thoughts about what Nick Saban kind of say, throughout his presser.
Yeah, just, like you said, he definitely seemed more media trained this time around. And, I think that was obviously, in response to the whole blow up situation with Jimbo Fisher and Deion Sanders. I think for his sake, yeah, it was best to be able to do that, because things were not good after, he said what he said. And I do think that, the problem with it was I don't think necessarily what he said was wrong. I just don't think it was right to call A&M out in the manner he did. Mm-hmm. If he was, and it's like you said, it's not like he was wrong necessarily. Like what he was saying about A&M has been confirmed, and whether it's recruits or their parents and families, talking a little bit about that. But, I think the one thing from the presser that really stood out to me was when he talked about, hey, listen, we paid our kids and everything like that as well, and they earned a lot of money from it. But, he said, I'm not worried about Alabama. Like, this is about the haves and the have-nots. Alabama is a have, he knows that. And they have been for years and years. They will be, they were when Bear Bryant was there. They will be after Nick Saban leaves, but at the same time too, when you got, even in the SEC, when you got teams like Vanderbilt and Missouri and Arkansas, those teams are going to have to find ways to be creative to be able to get kids to come in, some of those schools, aren't necessarily competing with Bama on the same level. So I do think he does bring up a valid point there. But, I do think the biggest thing is, I just wish that more schools were open about the situation. Like you said, that situation with Texas Tech, that's huge. That's a huge deal. I mean, think about that money. Some of those kids, they may not see that much money in a lump sum again in their lifetime. You know what I mean? Let alone, maybe they've got other things coming down the road with NIL, the more seasons they play at the collegiate level. But I really truly believe that, NIL, again, I've expressed my thoughts on NIL and how beneficial it is for the kids and everything like that. And a point that you mentioned that I wanted to get to is just the fact that, until the NCAA does something about it, that's the greatest thing about it is the NCAA really can't do anything about it at this point. They have to sit there and really just, honestly, they have to just wrap their arms around it and try to acquiesce to the schools and things of that nature. Because, the reason why NIL was even enacted was because of an antitrust lawsuit against the NCAA. So, and they don't want to, go up that hill again and, try to get into another lawsuit, potentially losing, because, a lot of legal pundits really feel like, if the NCAA were to try and do something again, it would be for naught. It would really honestly make the situation worse for them and take the control out of their hands. But yeah, as you mentioned, I do believe that, what Coach Saban said is very fair. I think it's very fair. I'm glad that he buttoned it up a little bit, because it was, especially, it's one thing with Jimbo Fisher. Obviously, Jimbo worked at Bama under Coach Saban for some time, and even just being SEC competitors, there's a natural rivalry. I really didn't like how he came at Deion Sanders. That was the one thing I thought was most out of pocket. But just again, your thoughts as well. What are you thinking in terms of, with Coach Saban, NIL, and just the state of it? Because again, this is only year 2 of NIL. We're literally in the infancy period of this thing, and it's already taken a crazy effect on the sport, and we're going to continue to see it take effect on the sport, especially as the conference realignment stuff starts to blow up the way that it has.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, and I think a lot of people are kind of falling victim to this. Is that it's kind of when Nick Saban makes a comment for the most part, and he kind of and whether whether if it's right or wrong, he does get criticized a lot. Some of it. He had his criticisms for the transfer portal. He had his criticisms for the spread offense. He had his criticisms, just kind of just the way college football was in the direction that it was headed for, and he's been saying stuff like that since the last 20 years. But for the most part, Nick Saban has always found a way to adapt to those things, and people try to find the next thing to try to put on Nick Saban whenever he makes a comment or whatever college football is going to look like towards the future. So, you said it right. I mean, Nick Saban is the half. I mean, Alabama is the half. They'll be fine for the most part. They put so much into their program to a point, and I think that to a point where I think if Nick Saban does decide to leave, I think Alabama will be fine from a recruiting standpoint. I feel like they will get a fair share of their talent. And, Alabama's not the only one that's affected by it. I mean, Louisiana, we saw with Brian Kelly and LSU, he's kind of addressed a little bit about, him struggling with in-state talent over the last couple of years. And now all of a sudden they're starting to get that back. I feel like, again, NIL is not the determining factor of getting a recruit. I mean, from talking to some of these recruits, Kyrie, you played the game. It's about relationships. Relationships, academics. There's so much more going involved now, besides paying a kid, thousands, potentially paying a kid thousands of dollars. And even if they get there, they're not even really guaranteed to get those. For the most part, it's just used as recruiting tools, recruiting tip. We saw Jordan Addison get upset. We saw, some of those, the rumor is some of those A&M.
Yeah, I'm not sure what just happened with Jarek there, but just going off of his point, I do think it's very fair because, especially when you consider, just where college football has progressed to. Again, this was something that I had heard today. I thought it was a very fair point, and just going off of the comments with Pharaoh World Class Hustler, shout out to Pharaoh. Yeah, you can bring those kids in. You can get them on campus, all that. But, are you going to be able to develop them? But honestly, the biggest thing in college football is recruiting. And so that's why I think coaches are taking they're putting their foot down. They're really making their stances clear about NIL because it's really affecting the game. It's really affecting how college football will be operating for years to come. And I think just for the fact that, something that had affected and impacted recruiting for years and years and years on an illegal level, now that it's legalized and now that teams are really, really, really buying into it, really, really digging deeper onto it and really saying like, hey, we're embracing this thing. We're not running from it. We know NIL is a legal thing now. So why not take advantage of it? And why not use it as a tool to bring in the best players? So, I do think that, that's a part of why, but at the same time too, it's just one little portion or it's just one portion of it, but I don't want to dismay that portion because, in college sports in general, but especially college football, recruiting really is about 80% of, your success. Obviously when you have an X's and O's coach like a Nick Saban, whether it was Chip Kelly when he was doing his thing at Oregon or, even someone like Ryan Day who stepped in, tremendously for Urban Meyer at Ohio State. I think just being able to get those guys on campus is the biggest thing for guys like those. But at the same time, too, not all of those coaches out there are like those guys in particular. So they got to do what they got to do to be able to bring those recruits in.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry about that. For the most part, my connection kind of caught off there. But, just kind of like, I was saying a little bit earlier, I was just pretty much just getting to the point where, Alabama, for the most part, when you take a look at the recruiting right now, for the most part, people associate the reason why they're 11th right now in recruiting is because they can't get the kids from NL. And, you saw, we all saw the Miami Hurricanes. The Hurricanes are killing it right now in recruiting, and they're 7th. Texas Longhorns is the third right now in recruiting, and they've done a great job in controlling their own state, which Texas, Florida, California are the 3 most, popular states and 3 of the best states when it comes to developing NFL talent. But, just like how Brock and a lot of the guys in the comment section was just mentioning a little bit earlier, Bama, you look at Caleb Downs. They just picked up Justin Haynes, who's a top running back in the country from Georgia. his dad played at the University of Georgia. He's the Georgia legacy, and Alabama was able to find a way to flip him. You look at Richard Young, another 5-star running back who's crystal to going to the University of Alabama. I mean, you look at Perkins, the top Cemeterian Perkins, the top linebacker from Ole Miss. He's a flip watch to go to Alabama. So Bama is in a prime position to getting a lot of guys and a lot of recruits. And when Alabama jumps up and they get into the top 5 or inside of it, then for the most part, a lot of people associate, well, Nick Saban's a hypocrite because he used NIL to get some of those kids. Well, Nick Saban literally just stated publicly that, yes, we use NIL, but we don't use NIL as a recruiting tool. We use NIL, like as soon as they get into the campus and they can perform to the best of their abilities and they earn their way, that's when they get NIL. Now, whether if it's true or not, it is what it is. For the most part, I do feel like kids, we see the Chargers and some of the jewelry and some of the cars and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen it for years, and Alabama's not the only program that does it. Everyone else has been doing it for years. I mean, you look at Louisville right now from their recruiting standpoint. Like Louisville got Reuben Owens, who is the top running back he's the top running back in the state of Texas, number 1 running back right now in the country, and Louisville was able to land him. They got a top interior offensive guard from Georgia, who is who could arguably be a 5-star in his class. They got him, and for the most part, they got Adidas, they got Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, they got a lot of stuff, but they are normally huge when it comes to Adidas. They got a big brand backing them up in the state of Kentucky. So, for the most part, we're going to start to see some risers, but we're also seeing teams making their adjustments to NIL. Texas Tech is literally paying all of their players on the roster $25K in walk-ons, something that I think a lot more schools will adapt. We're starting to see the adaptation of NIL more, way more quickly than possible. And but it's going to be interesting to see with conference alignment and all that type of stuff like that, how that also is going to have a huge impact in NIL. Because, in a couple of years, the SEC and the SEC and CBS, I mean, that's about to go down. And when that contract is up and they separate, then they're most likely going to go right to ESPN, because by the time their contract's up, 2025 is going to be coming, and you have Oklahoma and Texas. And ESPN is going to be a major player. And if CBS wants to try to get the SEC to broadcast to broadcast some of their games, they're going to have to pay double what they did before, especially with the SEC being a bigger brand than it is now. So it's interesting, man. I mean, it's interesting with conference alignment and these TV and these media deals, these media contracts and TV deals and all that type of stuff, and kind of how that ties all together. But for the most part, Nick Saban, I felt like did a much better job with this press conference, even though he still is getting his share of criticism. I think that just comes with him being the type of player that he's already is. But, for the most part, Alabama will be fine. The University of Alabama will be fine. It's what about some of those other schools that maybe doesn't, that are not really fortunate to use NIL towards their advantage? And, what are some of what methods and what ways are they willing to go in order for them to potentially bring recruits? And that probably is kind of the more shadier side of college football and recruiting that maybe Nick Saban is referring to.
Yeah, honestly, like I'm most concerned about, and we can really just dive this in or roll this over into our discussion about conference realignment. Obviously you mentioned it earlier with the Big 12 and Pac-12, their partnership really just falling through at the moment. I worry about schools like those, because think about it. You've got the Big 10 and the SEC. At the moment, there's 32 schools that are going to be playing in those two conferences by 2025. And, it's most of the, biggest name brands in all of the sport. It's USC, UCLA, Ohio State, Florida, Bama, Georgia, LSU, all these, Texas, Oklahoma, like all these schools that, are very recognizable, and they're going to be playing in unbelievably stacked conferences against mostly unbelievably, well-renowned schools and programs, so you're going to just have all these super matchups. The money that's going to be created is just going to be unbelievable. So, how could those schools not profit and benefit? And again, trickle down effect, those kids would be able to rack in from that, thankfully, because obviously the money in college sports in general, but specifically with college football, has just ballooned to this point. But I really am worried about schools like the ones that are left in the Big 12, like Tech, like Baylor, like Oklahoma State, like, you know, in the Pac-12 as well with Washington and Stanford and, you know, Arizona State, all those programs. Like, I think it's just going to be so tough to see how things play out because, you know, I really think that partnership falling through was, you know, it really opens up a can of worms because, you know, on one hand, you know, I do think that, you know, yeah, maybe the money didn't necessarily look right away, but I think the they missed out in coming together just for the fact of the long term. I think the long term growth and benefits that, you know, a partnership, a combination of the two would have worked so well. But I think sometimes the Pac-12 gets a little bit in its own way in terms of, you know, and again, you know, I was a, you know, I've always been someone who promotes school and, you know, it's obviously they're student athletes first, you know, students, you know, over the athlete part, because some of these kids aren't necessarily going to be playing professionally. And if they do, not all of them live long professional playing career lives. So, you know, I think, you know, with those schools, with those Pac-12 schools, you know, sometimes it comes back to bite them a little bit. And, you know, that's part of, you know, one of the, you know, various reasons that the Pac-12 or the Big 12 backed out of the deal. But, you know, it really could be a death note for both conferences. It really could, because, you know, you have the Houstons of the world going into the Big 12, and, you know, some of these schools that, again, can compete, very good programs, but, you know, they're coming up from there. It's not like they're leaving a Power 5 conference to join another. You know, they're coming up from Group 5 conferences. You know, that's a step up in competition, and, you know, you just got to wonder how will those teams be able to stack up on a week-to-week basis, you know, against some of these bigger, you know, traditionally bigger programs. So, you know, I definitely am scared on that front, because, you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I know, I believe it's the Pac-12 network can't renegotiate its media contract until 2024. So that kind of put a wrench into things too. But, you know, this might hold a team like Notre Dame from aligning, which obviously is, again, one of the, you know, 5 biggest name brands in the sport, and being able to, you know, bring them into the fold, or not being able to bring them into the fold, you know, would just be another nail in the coffin potentially. You know, I think at this point, again, we talked about it, Notre Dame really is the one program I think that is the linchpin in this all, because
Yeah.
they could do whatever. You know, they could go independent or stay independent. They could go to the Big Ten because that's their region, and obviously it's a super conference now, or they could go to the ACC because, you know, that's what they've done historically. They've, you know, got ties to the conference in other sports. So, you know, I think whatever Notre Dame does is really going to be the, you know, the Jenga piece that, you know, makes everything else fall from there. But I just want to hear your thoughts on it, Jarek. You know, because to be completely honest, like, I really do think, you know, if Notre Dame was smart, I personally, for their sake, I would probably go to the ACC. I know the Big Ten obviously is going to be a super conference, but Notre Dame can go dominate the ACC, but there's still high level name brand programs like Florida State, like Miami. You know, obviously Duke and UNC are known more so as basketball schools, but, you know, they've been able to have at least, you know, competitive football programs over the last decade or so, especially with Mac Brown now being at UNC back at Chapel Hill. So, you know, what are your thoughts on it all?
Yeah. So before I answer it, I guess I'll just answer Brock's question real quick. So Brock,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be doing a live stream tomorrow. So I'll be doing a live stream on my own channel, and then I'm also be doing more Twitter Spaces. So if you want to follow me at Jant716. I'm gonna do a lot more. You know, Kirito, he follows me on Twitter, so he's been in the Spaces. But that's where I'm gonna talk, you know, more college football recruiting, stuff like that. So make sure to follow me on Jan Sports YouTube, and then you can also follow me on my Twitter, because I'll honestly do way more spaces, and honestly it's a great way, because that's when you guys can talk, you know, for the most part. We will, and me and Kyrie, we're gonna have to talk about it, but I think that the plan might be soon enough that we might have our own kind of a fandom where people can join up here and we can obviously talk some sports or whatever you guys want to do. I think that'll be honestly fun. We'll do that probably sometime sooner or later. Me and Kyrie we're definitely going to talk about it, but we'll do that soon enough. But for the most part, man, you just follow me on Twitter, follow me on my YouTube, Gen Sports, and for the most part, we can definitely have some more interactions. But just kind of going to answer your point a little bit, I think Notre Dame, you know what? Because there's always been discussion about the Big Ten and the ACC, but the one thing that a lot of people love to say is that the ACC, well, that's falling apart. Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that if Notre Dame joins the ACC, that actually kind of saves the conference from anything from being dispelled, because Notre Dame as a brand as a whole, and the amount of money and the amount of attention and the amount of eyeballs that they would bring to the ACC would honestly, in my opinion, save them. I mean, you look at Notre Dame, you look at Clemson, you look at Florida State, if they can maybe resurge back a little bit, Miami. I mean, really, with Notre Dame joining, you would stop the potential of Miami from leaving, from Florida State from leaving and going to the SEC, and really creating this super gigantic conference. So I feel like for the most part, Notre Dame, as the brand that they are, would be tremendous for the ACC as far as getting as many as the top powerhouses as much as possible into your conference. You look at the Big 12 right now, one of the things, and the Big 12 is still, they're trying to expand to 16 teams, but the reason why the ACC is trying to do as much as they can of getting teams from the Pac-12, like a Utah, they're trying to get Oregon to join the Big 12, is because they want as many big brands and as many big names as possible to join their conference. Because if all of a sudden it's nothing but former teams that were from the Mountain West Conference or from the MAC or maybe the WAC conference with Boise State and TCU, like if they got those teams to join it, then I don't know if the eyeballs, I mean, it would just be the American Conference all over again. I mean,
right.
I always talk about it, but I feel bad. I mean, Cincinnati left the ACC, left the AAC, the American Conference, to join a Power 5 conference so that they can get more opportunities to go to the playoffs. Well, now you're literally going to the American Conference because that's what it's looking like. So that's why the Big 12 is still trying to fight and survive and try to get as many big names as possible, which would be huge if Oregon and Utah would go, which, we all know the Pac-12, I mean, sooner or later, I mean, it's over with them. It's the demise is happening sooner or later. But when you look at the ACC, if they can get Notre Dame, that would be huge. And if you look at Notre Dame, again, like you said earlier, they would dominate. I mean, maybe not up to the standard of Clemson, but they would be a top 3 team easily if they were to join the ACC conference. I mean, we saw back in the COVID year, back in 2020, I mean, Notre Dame didn't even win their conference championship, and yet they still made it into the college football playoffs. Why? Because they had the ability to join. I mean, first of all, not that many teams were great, and A&M were 5th, but the fact that Notre Dame had the prestige, they had the brand name, I mean, that allowed them to get inside, and they also had a great year, And if you look at Notre Dame's schedule the way it is, I mean, it's practically the majority of their schedule is filled with ACC teams. It's filled with ACC schedules, and then has a little bit of a mixture, whether it's a Big 10, you have USC, which is like the end game result of their schedule. But at this point, Notre Dame, I think right now they're that 5-star recruit. I mean, they're that 5-star recruit that's just sitting back, and everyone's trying to make their pitches to join inside their conferences. But I think Evan, looking at it, I mean, would it really make sense for Notre Dame to join the Big Ten? I mean, academically, it would make sense. But we all know Notre Dame does not join a conference simply for academics. Notre Dame is one of those. They're one of those programs that they would join in order for which conference can give them the most success. And is that the Big Ten? Is that the ACC? Because let's be honest, they don't really care that much. I mean, Notre Dame is honestly right now, this moment, they're a bigger hockey program than they are a football program. They have other sports with they're bigger in right now, and they win national championships more than football. But football and basketball is the moneymaker. That's it. I mean, no disrespect to some of the other collegiate sports out there, but when it comes to college football and what generates the most revenue, it is college football and it's college basketball, and it's really college football first. That's like right here, and then basketball is right there. I mean, it's not even a discussion. So which conference can give them number one money, and number two, as far as money, TV contracts, media contract rights, and then which conference can give them the most success, and that's the ACC. If they go into the Big Ten, it might be a little bit of a struggle competing with Ohio State, competing with Michigan, competing with Wisconsin, competing with Iowa. And I don't know if Notre Dame is willing to take that risk. The reason why they're independent right now is because not just because of the NBC deal, because they make $30 million. If they join the Big Ten and if they join the ACC, if they join in the conference, they can literally make they can make even more than 30 million.
Yeah.
Because of Ohio State's success, because of other teams' success, especially by reaching other bowl games and winning some of those major bowl games and college football playoff appearances and national championships. A lot of that money will be distributed throughout the conference and a lot of the teams. So Notre Dame could easily make up as much money compared to when they were independent, signed to NBC. So the biggest reason why they're independent is because they can make their own schedule. They can schedule who they want to play against, and that will help them have the most success. And again, I'm not taking any credit away from Brian Kelly and from what, some of the past predecessors. But when you look at Miami, how successful they were back when they were the U, they were independent for a long time. Then they joined the Big East, which was in a way the ACC conference, but a lot weaker. But Miami still had the option of scheduling who they wanted to schedule, because the Big East at the time they had 5-6 schools that were in the Big East, and then the rest of it they had to schedule on their own, which made sense for Miami. And they competed for national championships and they won recruiting battles. But when they joined the ACC, they had one 10-win season in 15 years. And I feel like that is going to be a fear for Notre Dame, that if they join the wrong conference, they might not be as successful. And that could be a reflection on recruiting and also on the academic side as well, the quote unquote academic side, since that is the major focus on some of these, on some of these schools here.
Yeah, agreed, 1,000%. And the interesting thing too with Notre Dame specifically is they really don't necessarily need to make a move immediately. They don't, because some of these changes aren't coming till 2023, some aren't coming till 2024, some aren't coming till 2025. So Notre Dame really doesn't have to feel like its feet are by the fire on this. I think this for 2022, just play the year out. Obviously Coach Freeman taking over now, his first year at the helm. Just see how things go with that. See, how they can, really, try to replace Brian Kelly and the success he was able to put together, as the winningest Notre Dame coach in history, which is crazy to even think about. But, I think with Notre Dame, if I were in their position, man, I probably would take the ACC. I think, again, as we mentioned, the name brand of some of the schools, you have the opportunity to dominate a conference, but, you still have some legitimate competition, especially now with Miami. I think with them and Mario Cristobal going down there, I think that really changes the game and, really could. I know we talk about programs coming back, but, I do think that's something that could help them come back to get back to prominence as well. But, just considering that, but then also too, you talked about the money. Obviously, the NBC deal is a big factor in why Notre Dame does what it does in terms of the independent route, being able to pick its own schedule. I think the money that the ACC deal would allow Notre Dame to make, because you got to think, obviously, under the light home games at Notre Dame, that's a big money maker. But think about all the East Coast slotted games that Notre Dame would be in. Whether it's a 1:00 game at UNC or an 8:00 game at Florida State. There's so many different opportunities that eyeballs would be drawn into Notre Dame. A lot of viewership would be drawn into Notre Dame. So I think if I'm them, I think that would probably be the best move. But independent for now, I think is the best bet, because they can continue to cherry pick. I don't want to say cherry pick, but pick their schedule in terms of who they want to play. And I think as the Big Ten becomes the Big 20, I think they'll be able to, keep that relationship and, lean on that and say, hey, we definitely still want to play some of these schools. Obviously with, with USC going over there now and, some of the schools that they've played historically as well from the former Big Ten conference. So, but yeah, I really do think that would be the best move for them. But again, they really hold all the cards. It's Notre Dame's world. Everybody else is living in it.
Yeah, man. And before we kind of move on to our next topic, I guess we'll read some of the comments. So so again, we had a lot of comments talk about Bama and Georgia recruiting for the most part, and I kind of just give my 2 cents about it real quick. So obviously Alabama for the most part has been dominant. I know a lot of you guys in the comment section will definitely know about it. 11th right now in recruiting, just like how I said, but August is about to be a month for Alabama recruiting as far as 5-star recruits, Caleb Downs, Kamani McLean. I mean, for the most part, I mean, he's been Cristobal's going to Bama, and Florida fans and Miami fans. I mean, if you're on Twitter Spaces and Facebook groups, I mean, it's been a war about just over Kamani McLean. And obviously, Malik Muhammad, he's about to make his commitment tomorrow. I mean, Brock and Crimson, I mean, you guys probably will know that probably better than anyone. Obviously Justice Haynes committed to Bama. I mean, it's been brutal as far as what Alabama could probably potentially do in recruiting and stuff like that. But some other comments as well. I mean, this was definitely a very interesting one, and I didn't even think about this one. But yeah, when Notre Dame joined the ACC back in 2020, I mean, they had a chance to snag Notre Dame and to really kind of back them up in a corner. But this was in a position where Notre Dame was forced. They were forced to go into the ACC conference because no one wanted to play against them. I mean, for the most part, Notre Dame wanted a schedule which can help them get into the college football playoffs. They really had no other option because a lot of the teams that they wanted to schedule either weren't playing at the time, or or they simply said no. And the only option they ever had was ACC opponents, so they had to join the ACC conference. And that's where the ACC could have got them. But they decided to kind of say, you know what, we'll make this 1-year agreement because you guys, for the most part, we already have an agreement that you guys play at least a majority of our schedule anyway. But that could have been an opportunity for the ACC to kind of bind Notre Dame in a way and kind of force them to join maybe a little bit later. So, yeah, you kind of, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I definitely understand where Zachary's coming from on that. But at the same time, too, just thinking about it like this, like, the 1 year that Notre Dame is in the conference, the one time like that they had the opportunity to really force them, like you said, to stick in the conference and to keep them around. But let's take a look at their record. I believe they were 10-2 that year. They went undefeated in ACC play. Obviously, they lost in the conference title game to Clemson, and then they lost in the semifinal to Bama as well. But it really almost showed why Notre Dame does what it does in terms of being an independent. The 1 year it joins a conference, it goes undefeated in conference play. And, yes, it fell on its face the last 2 games of the year, but, that was a year where all types of things were thrown everyone's way. And Notre Dame had, a season where they started the year out 10-0. You know what I mean? So I just think for that sake, I think it really played in Notre Dame's favor where they held the cards. If Notre Dame had joined the ACC that season and gone 8-4, and just had gotten squeaked out of the ACC and things didn't look good, I think at that point it would have been easier for the ACC to say, hey, listen, maybe this thing wasn't as easy as you thought it would be. Maybe you should stay and try to actually develop and try to see if you can get adjusted to this conference and maybe eventually become a powerhouse like Clemson has become, like Florida State and Miami were. Seeing a team like Wake Forest having the season it did last year, so I do think that, it would have been one thing if Notre Dame had fell on its face in the ACC, but it really dominated the ACC outside of the one true powerhouse that we've seen from the conference over the last decade.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And, we also, Farrell kind of, he had his 2 cents in there as well, pretty much saying that, Notre Dame, I think, can definitely take a hold of the ACC, which I think they could too. I mean, it's a big possibility, especially with the way they recruit. I mean, Notre Dame recruiting, they're number 2 right now in recruiting. So they've been doing a phenomenal job right now in recruiting. And, obviously Williams has done a great job over there so far. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if they can try to keep that up. And, I think they'll have a down year this year, but obviously, the future looks really, really bright over there in South Bend. But I guess we're going to move on to our next topic a little bit here. And that's kind of, we're going to talk about, a little bit fun. We're going to talk about some EA Sports and Madden ratings. Kyrie, we talked about this a little bit earlier. But, what are some of the things that kind of shocked you, that kind of surprised you about some of these Madden ratings, and kind of who do you feel like was kind of snubbed, or, which, players you think kind of was the rating was a little bit higher than expected?
For sure. Yeah. This is something I'm glad we're doing this, because this is something I've thought about and talked about for some time. And I've like tried to keep note of it over the years, but this year really just confirmed it. I think the Madden rating adjusters rely a little too much on, and it's hard to say because, like, obviously, when you're rating players and things like that, like, you have to rely on some history. Obviously, you're not going to just say, oh, so-and-so's a 95 because he looks good on paper. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have something to draw from and something to go back to. But I think they rely a little too much on history, and I don't think they give enough credit for guys. Maybe if it is a young guy that's, did their thing. Like, for example, I think with the wide receivers list this year, I thought for the most part it was on par. Cooper Kupp being right behind Devontae Adams, Devontae getting the 99 overall rating, Diggs being a 95, I believe. Most of those ratings were right. I do think DeAndre Hopkins' rating of being a 96 was a little high, but at the same time, too, obviously before last season, Hop was, arguably the best receiver in the game. So, it's not like he's fallen that far off, even though we'll see what happens when he comes back from the suspension. But to think that, I love Terry McLaurin, great talented player. I love Amari Cooper, big fan of him, arguably the best route runner in the game. But to see both of those guys rated above Jamar Chase after the season he just had, like, it makes no sense at all. I mean, I know Jamar Chase was a rookie last year, but to only give him a 97 rating after, setting all these rookie records, 200-yard games, getting the Bengals to the Super Bowl, torching Jalen Ramsey, who's widely regarded as the best corner in football, in the Super Bowl. So I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me. My brother actually brought this up. He said that, the Cowboys fans are the adjusters, so it makes sense. I'm interested to see how Ezekiel Elliott's rating will be because, again, we talked about Cowboys, a former Cowboy, Amari Cooper. He was a 90 overall rating. Again, I really do believe he's one of the best receivers in the game, but to rate him above Jamar Chase is craziness. To have DeMarcus Lawrence be rated a 90 overall, the man hasn't had a double-digit sack season since 2018. What are we even talking about? Mm-hmm. And then, you think about, I think, again, just talking about just how, like, history with things, I just think with some of these guys, I think they just are relying too much on, oh, yeah, so-and-so, he's done this historically, so, we're going to rate him this way. So that's my big beef with it. What are your thoughts with it, Jared? Because I could go on all day about this.
Well, yeah, Alvin Kamara, I don't think they released the running back ratings yet.
I don't believe so. I don't think
they released the running back ratings yet, but he better be over a 90. He better be at least a 93 or 94.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Agreed. Even having a down year last year.
Yeah, down year last year is still, he still was one of the best running backs in the National Football League. But and for the most part, because we got LSU and LSU fan and Huda and Jimbo and Huda, but for the most part, he can definitely attest to this. Jamar Chase being an 87 overall rating is just disgusting.
Even Justin Jefferson too.
Well, boy, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Watching them at LSU, that's the best receiving duo I've ever seen in my life. Like, in my lifetime watching college football, I haven't seen a receiving duo as dominant as Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. And for Justin Jefferson, like, literally ever since he stepped inside of the league, he's been a 1,300-yard receiver ever since he stepped inside the league. He was top 5 in receiving yards his first year. He's top 5 in receiving yards his second year. Jamar Chase was a top 5 receiving leader and touchdowns and touchdowns, receiving yards per catch in the National Football Leagues as a rookie. And you saw what he did in the postseason. You saw what he did in the Super Bowl. And, again, he cooked the best cornerback in the National Football League in Jalen Ramsey. And for him to only get an 87 overall just doesn't really make any sense to me. And, again, DeAndre Hopkins is great. Obviously, we saw some other players, but Amari Cooper being rated higher than him just did not make any sense. Like, why? Like, what's going on? For Jamar Chase not to be at least a 90 overall is ridiculous. And it's just some other ratings. Max Crosby is a 85. Rashawn Gary, who's coming off great year, by the way. Like, Rashawn Gary had a really, really good year, but he only had 9.5 sacks. Max Crosby,
both season.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, Max Crosby's been in the league for what, a couple years, 2-3 years now, and he's been one of the best edge rushers in the National Football League over the last 3 years. So it's like looking at EA ratings, like what goes into it? Like what goes into ratings? Like how do you know a player's awareness is this high? How do you know about their vision? How do you know about their kind of their swing move, about their block shed, about their speed, about and stuff like that? I mean, because I remember when TJ Hushmanzada, who was a former Cincinnati Bengals great, he discussed about it when they gave him like an 89 speed rating, and for the most part he was pissed off about it, and then he was arguing with some EA devs. They said, well, based off of your 40, you ran like a 4.5, so we decided to give you an 89. He says, dude, I never ran at the combine. I never even ran at my pro day. So where are you getting this information from? So it's like ever since then, you just got to be wary. And even if they base it off of 40 times, how do you know that they haven't gotten faster? Like, how do you know that they haven't gotten any faster yet? Because again, they run a 40, in February and then they're done, right? They might, some might run their pro day, but for the most part, they run a 40 in their pro day, and they might not run another one for the rest of their careers. So are we basing it off of that? Are we basing it off of real game stats? Because there's technology, there's data, there's facts now about about miles per hour and about the speed and the acceleration, about the ability. I mean, is EA taking advantage of the technology given to them by Pro Football Focus and all these other media sites that uses sports science and medicine in order for them to analyze data? Like, are they really taking advantage of that, or are they using past history in order for them to improve their stats? It's ridiculous, but it's crazy to me, that Jamar Chase was an 87 overall, Justin Jefferson, the rating that he is, Max Crosby being an 85. I mean, even Hollywood Brown, he's an 84 overall rating, and Jalen Waddle's an 84. I mean, they're tied together. I mean, Jerry Jeudy is like a 79. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm looking at some of these ratings right now. Oh my goodness. I mean, Cortland Sutton, an 84 overall rating is ridiculous, because I mean, that's just a 1,000 yard. I mean, Trey Hendrickson had he had 13 and a half sacks last year. He's an 85.
After he had a 10 plus sack season in 2020. So like,
he had back to back.
I mean? Yeah. So it just doesn't add up. And like, even just thinking about, just looking at this list again, talking about the history thing, there's again, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I respect him. He does a lot of little things that don't necessarily show up in the stat book, but there's no chance in hell that JJY is an 87 rating. It just makes no sense. It just makes no sense. Again, they just too reliant on history. I mean, I don't know. I really just don't understand it. I really don't. I mean, but on the flip side, just, taking a lighter look at things, it has been enjoyable seeing, all the guys being just as upset as we are with some of their ratings. One that stood out to me, obviously Jamar Chase, he spoke about it, it's motivation for him. The one that stood out to me was Darius Leonard, though, because yes, he was rated the 5th overall linebacker, but he was rated a 90, so I mean, obviously, yeah, it'd be nice to be a 95, it'd be nice to be a 99, but the fact that he was a 90 overall rating, they gave him the respect he deserved. So I don't know, it was weird for me to see that. But another name again that popped up to me in terms of guys that got snubbed a little bit, again, talking about guys being young and guys not necessarily getting that credit because they were just rookies. How is Micah Parsons not in 90 overall too?
Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, he was an first team all pro linebacker.
Like, I don't know. I digress though.
Devin White's an 85, by the way. Devin White is an 85. He's been one of the best linebackers in the league. I mean, Brandon Cooks got the respect he deserves. I mean, he's an 87 overall, but when was the last time you heard the name Brandon Cooks? I mean, really good player, but I mean, I mean, the Brandon Cooks and Jamar Chase are in the same realm right now. I mean, that's
what we're saying. That's literally what they're saying. Ridiculous. It's literally what they're saying. And again, it's no slight at Brandon Cooks, because he's phenomenal talent. He's had 1,000-yard season just about everywhere he's played, but at the same time too, like Jamar Chase was doing things we've only seen Randy Moss do, and guys of that nature. So like, I really just don't get it. Again,
Yeah.
this is exactly why I cannot wait until August of 2023 when NCAA football 24.
Oh, we're all playing that. Yeah.
Oh,
The only thing I'm nervous about is that 50% of the Madden devs are working on that game. So I'm a little nervous when it comes to that. But we're praying that we can get NCAA football back and we can just play that game, because I'm tired of it, man. I am sick and tired of EA Sports. I'm sick and tired of Madden and their ratings. Yeah. And literally, you can judge how bad of a game it is going to become because of ratings. If they can't even get the ratings right, how do we expect gameplay? Franchise mode hasn't even been fixed in a decade. It's just been maddening. It's been
the same thing. They just changed the layout. It's the same
stadium, same uniforms.
Like, I just don't get it. But I want to say shout out to Zach Cunningham again, because he keeps hitting the nail on the head with these comments, man. Like, the fact that what he say? It's kind of like Madden ratings are like the Pro Bowl. It's a popularity contest. I agree. Yeah. I 1000% agree, because I do think it is hard to, some stats it's hard to really account for, like, someone like Tom Brady, right, who doesn't have all the physical gifts and tools anymore as most quarterbacks, but like his mind is so smart and he's got so much, in terms of his intangibles and leadership and things like that. So it's hard to account for that in a video game. But at the same time too, like, some of these things, it's just like, it's inexplicable. It really is, like, the guys that we saw that were the best players in football last year should be addressed as such, and I know some guys have 1-year spikes and all that, but that's what the Madden rating adjustments are for, to adjust for when a guy might not live up to that rating that they were given at the beginning of the preseason. So again, I really just, I don't know. As silly as this is, I really just don't understand how it got to this point.
I don't know. And I think Anthony kind of just nailed on the head. TJ Watt's a 96 and Myles Garrett's a 99. Like TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, dude had tied the NFL record in sacks. He's been one of those dominant edge rushers in the National Football League, and yet Myles Garrett gets the 99 and TJ Watt gets a 96. I don't know where they base these ratings off of, but I don't know. It is what it is. But
Myles Garrett is a phenomenal
player, man.
Phenomenal player. He's been, first team all pro the last 2 seasons. He had 16 sacks last year. We're not saying he's bad. We're not saying that he, isn't deserving of a 99 rating, but how did he get a 99 rating over literally the man that tied the NFL's single season sack record in under 17 games too? Let's also note that, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't understand where they're, what's the separation on that. But again, those guys clearly are out of our pay grade, so we can't answer those questions.
Yeah, and who that, man? I appreciate you so much for the subscription, man. We definitely appreciate it over here, man. And oh my God, and Zachary brings up a great point when Peyton Hillis had that one. It wasn't even a great year. It was a good year.
It was a good year.
It was a good year, and he was 93 overall rated, and he was in the cover of Madden. I mean, it was it's a popularity contest. It is what it is, man. But I guess we're gonna move on to kind of the next topic here, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about some NBA, some basketball here, because there's some rumors going on with a couple players that could be on the same team together, and that's something that honestly is pissing me off, and that's gonna piss Kyrie off as well. And that's Kevin Durant, LeBron James potentially going to the Golden State Warriors playing together. So according to kind of Bleacher Report, they kind of put their report on it. Was that, for the most part, it's warming up. It's warming up a little bit that Golden State could sign Kevin Durant, that Kevin Durant could go there. And if that happens, LeBron James, the big possibility of him going to Golden State is huge. Now, LeBron, he has made it publicly clear that he wants to go to Golden State. If he ever has an opportunity to play with Stephen Curry, to play with Klay Thompson, he's going to take that chance. And the good thing is LeBron, I think LeBron is on his he's a free agent. Is he a free agent?
Who's that? LeBron?
LeBron, yeah.
He's not a free agent.
But he can get out this contract.
Yes, he basically he can sign an extension this summer. He's extension eligible
Yeah.
this summer, and he hasn't exercised that. So, at this point, I think for him, he's really just playing things out. I know the situation is very fluid. Obviously, the whole situation with Kyrie Irving and Russell Westbrook potentially, like, there's a lot of chatter right now. But I just I'll let you continue divulging on this, and then I'll jump in. But I just really I just can't with
Yeah.
this
So
one, with this
the
situation.
rumor, so the rumor is, according to Bleacher, that that is, if Kevin Durant joins Golden State, he's going to join He's going to join them as well. LeBron's going to go there, and that's something that I think will kill the league. Now, I had some arguments. Me and my friends kind of talked about it before. How LeBron, this is a great move for LeBron. He's chasing rings because at this point he just cares about legacy more than money, because he's already a billionaire, so that would make sense. But for LeBron to go to Golden State, I made the argument that I think it does not help his legacy. I think it will actually kill it, because there's already, we still talk about LeBron joining the Miami Heat with, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. And I remember when he joined, a lot of people just killed him for it, because people thought that, he's taking the easy way out to win championships and win rings. And, obviously he won a couple rings there. People still talk about that Mavericks Heat finals and how LeBron kind of, choked that away. But for the most part, I just think that this is not going to, this is going to hurt Kevin Durant's, this is definitely going to hurt Kevin Durant's legacy, because, him joining a second time, especially when not getting it done with Kyrie Irving and James Harden, and, trying to formulate his own legacy over there. That would just, that would kind of hurt him a little bit. Now, Kevin Durant doesn't really care about that much, but LeBron's chasing legacy. And if he's chasing legacy, there's going to come some consequences from trying to win rings, to try to take the easy way out. Now, LeBron, at this point of his career, he does not want to be a 29 point per game guy. He doesn't want to be a 30 point per game guy. He wants to be a 17, 18 point per game guy, 8-7 guy. Like, he wants to just, he wants other players to take the rock, not himself. But in my opinion, if he joins, and I'm not going to blame LeBron's decision at all, because LeBron can do whatever the hell he wants to do. That's LeBron James. He's earned the right. He's one of the greatest players of all time. People, you can make an argument he's the greatest. I think he's the second greatest. But whether you think he's the best of all time or not, he is in that discussion. He's in that GOAT discussion. And so LeBron can do whatever he wants at this point of his career. But for a fan perspective, I'm not watching basketball if LeBron does it. I'm sorry. Unless I'm covering it, I'm not watching basketball, because, we just left the whole superstar era. Like, we just left, for the Kevin Durant Warriors era, where you just were, barring injury, you knew that they were going to win the finals. It didn't matter which teams were coming up. It didn't matter which teams were challenging. The headline was that Golden State was going to win it. And, even though LeBron had a crazy run to get that Cavaliers team to the finals, everyone knew that they were going to lose to Golden State. Everyone knew in preseason it was going to be Golden State. And, even though Toronto did beat Golden State, we all know the reason why they won was because Kevin Durant and Klay they were out that series. And if they were in that series, they were going to win it. So it's just like the fact that, we had the LeBron James era back in the Heat, and, for LeBron to kind of join Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving back in Cleveland, and Golden State to kind of formulate their thing. And those two teams were kind of tearing up the league. And then we had the Golden State era with Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Stephen Curry, and Draymond Green. And now we're in an era, and we just left it. And we went back to basketball. And even before then, you had KG with Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, and Kobe Bryant had his team with, Kobe had his team with Paul Gasol and Andrew Bynum, when those two were all-stars back in the day. We were in an era. We went back to an era where it was unpredictable. The last couple seasons, you didn't know who was going to win the title, right? Even with LeBron and Anthony Davis, not a lot of people thought that they were going to win it. A lot of people thought that someone else could potentially win that thing. So, the last 3 years were kind of unpredictable. And the fact that we might actually go back to that era is something that is just, that's going to kill my vibe for basketball. And again, it'll be watched. A lot of people will view it, but if they're dominating the league and doing all this, I think that honestly the ratings and viewership will go way down. I think it will go way down before, where everyone thought that this particular team is going to win the finals. So what's the point of even watching basketball anymore?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. Like, I mean, even as LeBron is what 37 now, he'll be 38 in December. KD's 33, going on 34. Um, Obviously Steph Curry, 33. He'll be 34 at the end of next season. So, like, even as those guys are in their advanced stages, you would have, in my opinion, the most well-rounded, most all-around player of all time, the greatest shooter of all time, and then the greatest scorer of all time on the same team. Like, I just don't, like you said, I personally would just never want to watch that. Even like, as LeBron's declining, quote unquote. I mean, we just saw what he was doing in the Drew League the other day, and even as a guy who is clearly towards the end of his career rather than at the beginning, he's still a guy that is easily one of the top 5 basketball players in the world. He may be the top guy anymore, but I think it's clear as day what he still is, what he still brings to the table. So I don't know. I really just hope these are rumors. I really just hope this is, like Jimbo Hudat said, it would mess the league up. And like for Bron, yeah, like personally, I think this would hurt his legacy more than anything. Like, at least with Kevin Durant, like, he can say, well, I want to go play with those guys in Golden State again. I just miss those guys. I miss all, camaraderie, all that. For Bron, I think just all facets. Not only are you teaming up with, KD, who, well, it's hard to say at this point. I mean, Steph Curry is probably the more comparable contemporary, because even though I think KD's a greater individual player, LeBron and Steph have won more on a consistent level, in this era. So, but you would be joining your 2 greatest adversaries essentially on a team that you lost to in the finals several times, and obviously you beat them in the finals too. But I just think to do that, and yes, he is super close with Draymond Green, I just personally don't think that does anything for his legacy. And I know LeBron is a legacy guy. He's a guy that thinks about his legacy. Yeah, he might have left Cleveland. He might have left Miami and everything. But the man has won a title in every place he's played. That's something that'll be stamped on his legacy forever. I don't care how he went about it. I don't care if he, was making super teams, whatever the case is. The fact that he won a title with each team he played for, that's a big deal, So personally, I just believe that, if that is to happen, and even Adam Silver spoke out about, KD's trade requests in general, the fact that he, has even expressed his desire to leave Brooklyn when you have 4 years left on your contract. Like, I know it can be a hypocritical thing because, on one end, like, I know, everybody's like, well, these teams, they're not loyal and all this and that. They're not. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them trade guys before their deals are done and things of that nature. The trade deadline is there for a reason. So I get that. But at the same time, too, like, you came to Brooklyn. You came there to build something. You came there to be the leader of, they put this roster and this coaching staff and added these role players because of Kevin Durant. Yes, Kyrie Irving also came along with it, but again, he's not coming to Brooklyn if Kevin Durant's not coming to Brooklyn. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, I just personally, I really just don't want to see, those guys team up. It's just been for too long for them to be adversaries. I would hate to see them come together like that. But also, too, like, I just think Kevin Durant, he's whatever situation he ends up in, it's almost got to be like, I would almost rather see him go to a situation like a Memphis or like a Toronto, and okay, like, things didn't work out. He tried to make his own super team, but hey, he went to this young team and helped those guys develop and brought them along, and then they got to win a title, or they got to play in a finals or a conference final. So I think that would do more, way more for his legacy than if he were to go win another title or two with, those guys in Golden State, or if he were to team up with LeBron.
Yeah, man, and it's just, I don't know. It's like, Kevin Durant. I mean, obviously, there's another rumor too that Philadelphia has been trying to desperately, get his attention as well. Which honestly, I think that would be a little bit better. But at the same time, it's like, Kevin Durant, for the most part, again, he doesn't really care that much about his legacy. I think at this point, he just wants to try to do his best for his career. But for LeBron James, I mean, especially when you're chasing Michael Jordan, when you're trying to eclipse him, and some people think, some people will say that he is eclipsed. But for LeBron James, again, he cares about legacy, and I think he does want to try to create he wants to separate a path from the rest of the pack. I don't know if this would be the right decision for him to do that. Again, I can understand him not wanting to have carry all the burden on his shoulders, because he's going to be 38 years old, and it's as your body gets older, there's there's going to be certain things that you can't do anymore, and LeBron James is a genetic freak, and LeBron, even at the age of 38, is still one of the best players in the world. But at some point, age will catch up, and your body won't heal as fast as it used to be, and there's a lot of things, especially when you're up.
Clear. It has been clearly already. He hasn't played over 70 games in any of his seasons with the Lakers, so it's clear the decline is already, it's in front of us. He's still he's still one of the best players on the planet, but his decline is it's showing. So
yeah, and I completely agree with that. And yeah, I mean, even when he scored 30 points per game, he played 55 games. So that's definitely, unfortunately, it's showcased. And and honestly, I think with the amount of time that he has left, does he really want to play in LA? Like, does he really want to try to formulate his own version? It's like, we saw Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook, like those guys had a meeting, a FaceTime call, and LeBron was like, yeah, we're all going to stick together, and they all agreed that they were all going to stick together. But does LeBron really even mean that? Because we don't know. I mean, the relationship between him and those guys in the front offices has not been the best so far. LeBron James, and even if like Russell Westbrook is on the decline, Anthony Davis is not really healthy. He's struggling with knee injuries, and if we have another season where LeBron has to carry the burden of his shoulders at the age of 38. I think that's when you can sit up here and say that maybe it's time for me not, maybe LA is not the final destination resting place for me. Maybe going to the Bay Area or going somewhere else where I could, where the last 2-3 years in me being LA, I could have potentially been competing for a championship. Maybe that's the best answer. And again, he doesn't need money. I mean, he's good for the sport. It's just, he's got tons of sponsorships, which will pay him hundreds of millions of dollars per year. He's made over $1 billion throughout his entire career. I mean, him and his family are well off. I mean, at this point, it's just about, if he's playing, it's chasing legacy, and it's trying to get his legacy to the NBA with Bronny James and potentially Bryce James being in the NBA one day. So, LeBron he doesn't have that much to play for besides those things, and that's why I think LA could be a potential destination where I think he can say, this is just not the best time for me in my career. But kind of moving on to the last topic we're going to talk about, I guess we'll talk about a little bit about chatter talk. Again, we've been talking for a minute, honestly. So, definitely we won't be focusing that much on the training camp aspect as we want to. But again, maybe the next stream, we can definitely focus on that. But I guess to talk about some training camp, because now, obviously, we got Bills training camp coming on the 24th. A lot of other teams will start around that time. Kind of who are some of the players, and this could just be like around the league, what are some of the players that you're kind of looking forward to the most as far as training camp goes?
Yeah, a couple different names that I'm interested to see if they can come back to form. I want to see how Saquon Barkley does, physically in the New York New York Giants offense now that Brian Daboll's down there. It's a make or break year for Daniel Jones. So we'll see, what he's able to do under Daboll's command. I'm really interested by two guys in New Orleans. One is Michael Thomas, and then another is Jameis Winston. Those two guys, I think, for Michael Thomas, he's obviously been at the peak. He was Offensive Player of the Year the last full season that we got to see him play, but that was also 3 years ago. you know. So, you know, that it'll be interesting to see if he can return to form. But also for Jameis, you know, I thought Jameis was, you know, on pace to have his best season as a pro before he tore his ACL ironically against his former team, the Bucks, last season. So, you know, it'll be cool to see what he can do year 2 in this offense. I know Sean Payton is out now, but Pete Carmichael is the OC, and he's been the OC ever since Peyton took over with Drew Brees back in 2006. So he's, you know, he knows that system as well as anybody does, you know. I'm really excited to actually see another member of that offense too, with Chris Olave. You know, he was one of my favorite receivers, especially as an Ohio State guy. So, you know, it'll be cool to see what he can do out there. But, you know, and obviously, you know, as well, I think in terms of defensive players, really intrigued by, you know, my guy Khalil Mack going out to LA, you know, him teaming up with Joey Bosa, being able to see what they can put together in that front four. On that back end as well, they got J.C. Jackson, you know, so he's a huge name. I think he's a guy that really is going to shore up some things for that defense. That defense really just, you know, was going through it for a long time. And, you know, be able to get a guy like him on the back end, got Asante Samuel Jr. now, you got Derwin James now as well. I just think he helps elevate that secondary. In terms of any other guys, you know, in terms of quarterbacks are obviously going to go gain a lot of attention, but a couple of the names that really stand out to me, I think Lamar Jackson is one. You know, he's a lightning rod, regardless of where you stand on him. I personally am a huge Lamar fan. I've been a fan since Louisville. You know, to see what he's been putting together throughout his career. And it's crazy how quickly people forget, man. People forget, obviously, and I'm not even talking about the MVP stuff, you know. Even as recently as last season, you know, the game he had against Indy, the game, you know, the finish to the Detroit game, you know, being able to bounce back from a slow start against Kansas City and getting that demon off his back. You know, I just think Lamar has shown so many times, like, hey, you say this is a roadblock for him, he eventually is going to jump over that hurdle. Now, can he clear that hurdle and get to a Super Bowl? The question remains to be seen, but I'll take a guy that's won 37 games in his first 4 years as a player. You know, I'll take that guy on my team any day of the week. But then also, too, I'm really excited to see what Russell Wilson does. I think the Denver Broncos are, you know, a team that could really scare a lot of people. You know, they've got a pretty solid core on both sides of the ball. He's got a ton of weapons, even with the Jerry Jeudy situation being kind of undecided, you know, his legal troubles and everything like that. But I mean, you got Cortland Sutton still, you still got KJ Hamler, Albert O is still there. Both of those running backs, and Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, pretty solid offensive line as well. And then sticking in that division, I think a very dark horse, underrated player that I personally would even put, you know, I think he's a value bet in terms of winning MVP. Derek Carr. You know, I'm really interested to see what he does in that offense. Ton of weapons. I mean, you had your best friend in Devontae Adams. You still got Waller. You still got Hunter Renfrow. You still got Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake, but you add Zamir White to that backfield. So, and with Josh McDaniels coming over, I mean, he's a great fit in his system, but I also think, you know, he's going to be able to just get the ball out of Derek's hands, which Derek has done a tremendous job of throughout his career, but has really improved that over the last couple of seasons. So it'll be fun to watch how those guys, you know, come together. How about yourself, Derek? Are there any names, any specific players, any specific teams that you're looking out for, that you're, you know, excited to tune into as training camp approaches?
Yeah, so one of the names I'm definitely looking. Well, this is really all three, and this is just maybe the bias side of me because I'm a Bama fan, but it's literally all three. It's Mac Jones, Tua, and I think it's Jalen Hurts. You know, all three of those guys are starting quarterbacks, and I really want to see like how they can develop, especially going into some of them in year 3, some of them is going to be in year 2. But with Mac Jones with the Patriots, you know, it's kind of like, you know, we saw what the Patriots and Bill Belichick was able to do. I mean, their roster was not that great of a roster last year, and yet they were able to still make it to the playoffs. And you know, Mac Jones was a big part of it. I mean, he was a big part of it. Not the sole reason, but he was definitely a kind of a serviceable guy, a guy that was not going to really lose you the games, but he really wasn't going to really win you a lot of those games. So they kind of, in a way, they made him a game manager. And again, you know, with Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris, the offensive line that they kind of have, and they relied on their defense, especially in their secondary. I mean, the Patriots were able to go 10-7, and the Patriots were, in the wild card round. But at one point, I mean, they were even on top of the Buffalo Bills at one point. They beat Buffalo. Of course, that windy game, I think we all can't, forget that. And, so the Patriots definitely overachieved what they did last year. But now going into year two with Buffalo, with Buffalo getting better, with other teams in the conference getting better. I mean, you talked about it. I mean, you look at Denver. I mean, Denver. Kansas City is still going to be considered a threat. I mean, Indianapolis. I mean, a lot more teams. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson coming back healthy is going to be very interesting. So there's a lot more teams that are going to be healthier. So how will New England respond? How will Mac Jones get better? Because they're going to need him to get better. They're going to need him to be, to take a next step to, his development if they want to potentially compete for not just for making a playoff spot, but potentially competing for championships. And then also you look at Tua Tagovailoa. This is it. I mean, this is it for Tua. I mean, and I am a huge Tua fan. I've been following Tua ever since he played for St. Louis and Honolulu, Hawaii. I mean that I've been following for such a long time. And, I remember him committing to Bama and him, going to, him arriving to Bama and competing against Jalen Hurts in the spring games. And, obviously, having, fighting for his reps in order for him to play and threatening the transfer. And, obviously the rest was kind of history where Tua was one of the best quarterbacks in Alabama school history. But I mean, this is it. This is it for Tua. I mean, Tua has everything he needs. I mean, he has Jalen Waddle. He has Tyreek Hill, another name that I'm definitely watching out for, because a lot of people have made the comparisons to Kansas City's offense and Miami's. I mean, Brett Coleman, phenomenal content creator himself. I mean, he made a video talking about how, comparable Kansas City and Miami's offense was. So so we'll see. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. I mean, Jakeem Grant's still there. I mean, Mike Gesicki's still there. I mean, Miami has so many weapons. Their defense, their defense has been top 10. The talent in Miami has been incredible. And if Tua can't get the job done, then they're going to move on with Teddy Bridgewater and most likely look for a quarterback either next year or throughout free agency. So this is Tua's last opportunity because he has everything he needs. Now, the offensive line could be a little bit better, but, Josh Allen with Buffalo and back in year three, Josh Allen didn't have the best line. He had an average line for the most part, and yet, Josh Allen was able to put up MVP-like numbers. So this has to be a year where Tua has to step up, show signs of development, and show that he could be a franchise quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. Otherwise, this could be it as far as maybe his last opportunity to showcase of why he can be a starting quarterback in the league. And I would say the same thing goes for Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts, again, I mean, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert being there, the offensive line, the defensive talent, they got, you look at the draft with Jordan Davis, with Fletcher Cox, and, a lot of those guys, some of those core pieces on those Philly teams are still there. Their secondary has gotten better. I mean, they got Bradbury. I mean, Darius Slay still there as an outside corner. So their secondary has been improved. Their linebacking core has been improved. The defensive line's been improved. The offensive line is still going to be top tier. The running game with Miles Sanders is still going to be there. I mean, Jalen Hurts is everything he needs. And they did make the playoffs last year, but again, very similar to Mac Jones. I mean, he was a serviceable guy. I mean, Jalen Hurts was a dual threat, but not a guy that could really threaten you that much with his arm. And with two potentially top tier receivers, they're going to need that. And so the Philadelphia organization, Howie, has done everything in his power to help out Jalen Hurts. They've given him an opportunity to kind of showcase why he can be a top talent in the league. And and very similar to Tua, this is the last chance for Jalen Hurts to showcase why a lot of people think that he can be a franchise quarterback, a starting quarterback in this league instead of just being a Tyrod. I hate to say it, but maybe a Tyrod Taylor guy. Where serviceable, they can create some things with their legs, but they're guys that just can't get the job done, and those are not franchise tier guys. So those are some of the names I'm kind of looking forward to. I mean, there's some more. I mean, Tyreek Hill, like I just said before, Lamar Jackson with Baltimore, especially because his mom, who's his agent, they want a career-defining lucrative deal. I mean, they want a contract deal that surpasses Mahomes, that surpasses Allen. And Lamar Jackson's going to have to show it. He's going to have to showcase it. Now, they haven't really helped him out the best, but unfortunately, Baltimore has put him in a situation where he's going to have to make everyone on that team better. And it's not just making the playoffs, because we all know, I mean, Lamar, he doesn't have to throw for 4,000 yards. I mean, we've seen Lamar Jackson dominate the league with his legs and throughout his arm, but he's gonna have to step it up a gear, and that's competing for Super Bowl championships. So Lamar Jackson, definitely a name I want to look out for. Russell Wilson with Denver is another name. And then also Ryan Tannehill. I mean, Ryan Tannehill is a guy that's been in the news, he's been in the headlines, and he has a quarterback, and he has a quarterback now from Liberty that is going to be there looming around his shoulder. And we've already seen that Ryan Tannehill doesn't really, he's not going to neuter him. He's not going to mentor him. And I think that's kind of wrong. But, Ryan Tannehill for the most part is going to do him. And without AJ Brown being there, I mean, yes, for the most part, you got Treylon Burks. But, again, will Treylon Burks, what type of receiver can he be? And is he going to be in that same category, in that same level as an AJ Brown? I just don't really think so. So we're going to see if Ryan Tannehill can make the team better, or was it just Derrick Henry that was making the team better all along with AJ Brown being there to help you out? So there's a lot more guys that we can definitely name, but obviously those are some of the names I'm just kind of looking forward to.
Yeah, I think with Tua and Jalen Hurts, those two guys specifically, it's the classic case of, hey, can you build up a roster that's good enough to overcome, quote unquote, the deficiencies of your quarterback? But the thing I like most about both of those situations are both guys are in situations that I think are really truly built around them and are built around their strengths. So I do think that they'll be able to at least have success this year, but what does that look like? So we'll have to wait and see. But another name as well, and it's arguably the top guy in the sport, it's Patrick Mahomes. And a lot of people are counting him out now that Tyreek Hill is out. I know he's got a cast of receivers now with Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Mecole Hardman, obviously. I really, really, really like the rookie Sky Moore that they got from Western Michigan. I actually got to see him play at UB. He torched UB last season, so I got to see that live and in person. And, and obviously we can't forget about arguably the best tight end of this generation, and Travis Kelce too. So, there's a lot of pieces that Mahomes still has to work with. I think this is the deepest backfield he's ever had. You got you bring in Ronald Jones, you bring back Jerick McKinnon, and obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still there too. So I think
deep running back room.
For sure. So I really think that with this unit that Mahomes can really show, hey, I'm growing. I'm not just a flashy sidearm, no look, you know what I mean, type of guy. I think he can really show like, hey, I'm getting better at those quarterbacky things, and just really can show that he's in command of this offense. This will be year 6 for him, 5th as a starter, year 6 as a player. But even still, though, just thinking about him, really taking command of this offense under Bieniemy and Andy Reid, I think he can do that this year. So it'll be interesting to see and fun to see how it all plays out, especially in a division as loaded as the AFC West.
Absolutely, man. But yeah, guys, we're going to call it here. We're going to call it right here for a show, man. We appreciate everyone stopping by. We had pretty much a packed house here, so we definitely appreciate you guys stopping by. Nabil, man, shout out to Nabil. He's a regular here for the fan base. He just got here a little bit late. But yeah, man, we definitely appreciate you guys so much for stopping by. Zachary Cunningham's been a beast so far in the comment section. I mean, he's been snapping. Yeah, he's been slapping. But Crimson Brave, Brock, who that. You guys know who you are. I mean, thank you guys so much. Pharaoh, thank you guys so much for stopping by the channel. And like I said before, if you guys want to catch more of me, definitely follow me on Twitter. And let me see, because I actually posted here if you guys want to follow me there. But if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Gent716. That's if you guys are feeling comfortable about it. And let me see, there it is. Yeah, so follow me right here on Gent716 on Twitter, because I do a lot more Twitter spaces, and I know a lot of you guys want to talk about recruiting, and we couldn't really touch that much upon recruiting. I tried to do my best there, but definitely follow me there, because I do a lot more Twitter spaces, and I'm also going to do a live stream tomorrow talking about recruiting on my YouTube channel at Gent Sports, so make sure to follow me there if you guys want to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, make sure to hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe, especially if you're coming from the Buffalo, if you're coming from Gent Sports, because again, Buffalo Fan Base Sports so many content creators that for the most part, I mean, they'll go deep in, they'll take a deep dive into a lot more than we talk about sometimes. I mean, hell, a lot of people are talking about soccer and the World Cup qualifications and, you know, for the most part, hockey season. I mean, so definitely stop by. A lot more content creators, especially if you're a huge fan of all those sports topics, definitely stop by their channel. And again, whether if you're watching us on Twitter and Facebook or whatever you're getting your podcast we definitely appreciate you guys for stopping by and watching this, because, you know, some of your comments we couldn't really, especially on the Twitter side, we can't really see Twitter comments and all that type of stuff on here. But if you guys are watching it from over there, we definitely appreciate you guys. And hopefully you guys can stay tuned with us. Again, we'll be live streaming every Tuesday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6 o'clock if you're on Central Time. If you're on the West Coast, 4 o'clock, especially if you're over there near the Bay Area, right near those Warriors, where they could be picking up Kevin Durant and LeBron and destroying the NBA. You know, you guys could be watching us at 4 o'clock over there on the West Coast. But yeah, guys, we're about to head out of here, and we will catch you guys on the next one too. Again, Tuesday, 7:00 p.m. if you're on the East Coast, 6 o'clock if you're on Central Time, and if you're on the West Coast, definitely on 4 o'clock. So we'll catch you guys later. Again, Jared Call with Kari Demos, and we're out.
You are now tuned in to the newest Bills Mafia production, FambaseSports. Join Jarek Hall and Kari Demos as they take you around the world of sports every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on the official network of the original Bills Mafia.